Okay. Aha. I was goofing around with my headset, so I had to adjust this. We're a little bit early. I figured I would go ahead and do this right now. Okay. So let's open this up. Hey, Otto. Open my window. Channel. This that. Hopefully my the portal will work today. It only worked today. Okay. Please. Go ahead and close Facebook so I don't get anything weird there. That's unavailable. Hush, Otto. Stop being loud. Hush. Okay. What was I doing? Oh. Shh. Background. Motion. Email everybody. Right. And then grab my URL. There's not in there. Huh. Okay. Cool. Alright. I did change my account name. Alright, got a few people in. Good. Yeah. Change my account name. Be a little more there's a couple of reasons. Main one, so it's slightly more what word am I looking for? Professional, I guess. Let's go ahead and open this up. Well, let's leave it closed for just a moment because I still need to do this. Slightly more professional. Also, it jives a little better with a group that I'm in. And if I start actually uploading videos on a more regular basis, it'll be better to use that. So, but yeah. So I'm gonna give this a couple of minutes. Let a few more people in. And I actually need to take roll. Because they want to make sure that we've got what's the word? Retention. So assuming that we don't have awful lag in the videos. Make sure actually that I'm live. Yeah, see, I'm not live. So yeah, every so often you guys check your video and make sure that it's running live. Because I'm doing my best to make sure that the stream is as latency free as possible, so that I can get your questions and respond to them without lag. But anyway, I'm gonna have to take roll, and I want you guys to respond in the chat when you hear your name. I know it's gonna be weird over this, but I gotta do something. It also helped me, have an idea of who's responding. Kind of get because I've got your names here, looking at the actual role on the site here, but I literally only have 2 faces in the system. So whenever you guys are, commenting and stuff, I don't know who's who. If we ever do finally go back to class, I'm not gonna know who's who. But if I can at least put a name to a commenter, it'll be somewhat easier. So we've got 8 people, and 2 of those are probably me. It's not as many as I'd like, considering this class has got, let's see, this is what, 14? Yeah, 15 people. We're at about half, which isn't ideal. Well, I guess I can go ahead and start since class has begun, and then I'll see who else here in just a little bit, and I guess towards the end of class, just for the hell of it. As usual, if you folks have any questions, let me know. I accidentally fell asleep a little early last night, and then I woke up at like midnight, 1 a.m., and have been awake since, so forgive me for being sleepy. Okay, so let's see. Yeah. Oops. Key being actually gonna do that today. Okay. And actually got an email asking what I just said, which is good. People have the same thing in mind that I've got. So yeah. So in a little bit, I will. Again, make sure that it's staying live, and it's not, because YouTube hates me. I will call roll, and I'll need you guys to respond in my little chat bar there. And as usual, if you have any kind of questions or concerns or whatever, let me know. Be it here in the chat bar or later just via email. So that's good. We were getting into Egypt, so let's see. Oh, lordy. Alright. Oh, please don't start auto. So, Egypt got started a little while after Mesopotamia. Like with Mesopotamia, it depended on its river system. Now, Mesopotamia had the Tigris and Euphrates, so it was in between two rivers. Egypt was built on the River Nile, as I imagine most of us know. That's usually a pretty well-known geographic feature, is the Nile River. And as such, being built on the Nile River, it's known for its agriculture. It was more stable than Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, again, many aggressive city-states fighting one another, whereas Egypt, surrounded by deserts, so had less invasions happening. Now, there were two kingdoms. We'll talk about that in a little bit. They eventually merged into the single dynasty of of Egypt. And we'll go from there. Very good. Thank you, Miss Scott, or Mr. Scott. I'm sorry. I don't know from Tyree Scott. Okay, Mr. Scott probably. Thank you, Tyree Scott. I've got you in here. I got your email earlier. Okay, well, then I guess I can just start. What do you want, Otto? Start from the top. Destiny Baxley, are you here? And I'm gonna give it a minute because I don't know of the lag. How you doing, Otto? Destiny Baxley. Okay, cool. Jordan Brown. Jordan Brown. And if I miss you and go to the next person before you respond due to the lag, don't worry about it. Elizabeth Chandler, you were next. Okay, cool. Oh no. Well, I've got you on here. Okay, you're cool. LaCara Burgess, are you in here today? Burgess. Elizabeth Chandler responded. Joshua Coleman. I guess this would probably be easier with Zoom, but I don't know. I don't quite trust it. And if you're using like a YouTube screen name that's not your name, just like put your name in your comment. cat's an idiot. Brooks, Eddie, E-A-T-T-Y. Normally I tell you to tell me how to pronounce it, but, you know, this is kind of a one-way conversation. Okay, cool. Ainsley Wagner. Or Ainsley. Got two N's there. Ainsley Wagner. Look at all of you with your official names for your screen names here, and I've got my derpy nerd thing going on. Alright, Jenna Harris. No, Jenna Harris. And again, if I call you and don't see you and move on and then you respond, I've got it. It's all right here in the chat. It's not going anywhere, and I'll be sure to get you. Dalen Mincy. And the most important thing about this is when I get done, if I didn't call you, let me know, and I'll be able to get in touch with somebody. Ansley. Okay, good. Hannah Parsons, Jardy. Brown, cool. Okay, good. Hannah Parsons, I don't think. Okay. Michelle Ruiz. Hannah Parsons, good. Again, sometimes there's a lag on this. Make sure you've got the video on live if you can, just so if you need to ask questions or respond to something, it can be as little latency as possible. All right, Tyree Scott, you emailed me about it, so we got you, and you were the first one here. Carolyn Shaw, did you? No. Carolyn Shaw, are you here? It's got a small class size today. Memory Stone, you already responded, so I've got you. And then I'm gonna go ahead and apologize in case I don't pronounce this right, and since I can't get a verbal confirmation, Stasia Vu, I assume is how I pronounce this name. Are you here, and you can confirm or deny whether I pronounced that properly? I apologize if I didn't. If you're not here, we'll have to figure it out in the future. And if not, then I guess we can move on. We'll figure something out. Oh, good. Okay, great. Good. Then, and I assume there's nobody here in the, I guess, classroom, as it were, that's not on my roll that's supposed to be on the roll. Because if there are, you need to let me know, and I'll let the registrar know, and we'll get it fixed, because that's important. Otherwise, that's roll. I think what we'll probably do in the future is just go ahead and have you guys just let me know you're here, since essentially you're signing a roll by just saying that you're here because of the chat function, and that'll be a way for me to have a record of it. So I guess that works. All right, guys, appreciate it. We can jump back into things. Thank you very much. I know it's kind of clunky, but we're all working through this. Okay. So very good. Of course, I've got holes in my pages from my idiot cats running across them. Excuse me. So it's weird going back to this stuff because I've been doing nothing but making notes for my other class, and it's been stuff about America, and it's like, so back to Egypt in 3000 BC. So Upper and Lower Egypt were separate until about 3000 BC. Now, I need to clarify that when they talk about Upper and Lower Egypt, they're not talking about North and South, because that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is the river, because again, the whole all of Egypt is built around the Nile. And I'm gonna turn this down. Oh no, you're good. I've got you're on the roll. Thank you for responding. That's how we're gonna do the roll. Essentially, is pop your name in the comments. But I mean, since you're using your name as your name, that's good. You're fine. No worries. If we make it back to the continuum, that's my late policy. Is the door is always open, so I'd rather you be late than not show up at all. We're good. Where was I? Oh, so the Nile again. Egypt relied on the floods of the Nile. As I said with Mesopotamia, the river would flood and then recede, and the farmers would irrigate their fields in such a way that rather than wash away everything, it would simply recede and leave the silt, the mud that was full of nutrients and everything, and make the soil really rich and just good for growing the crops. So again, this was very important for building a civilization. So obviously, when they talk about Upper Egypt, it's not anything to do with a compass or this idea of north or south, but upper in terms of the direction of which the river flows. And the Nile River flows from south to north. It's one of the only, I think it's the only major river that flows from south to north. So Upper Egypt is in the south, and Lower Egypt, which is where the delta is, where it spreads out and then flows into the Mediterranean Sea, is actually in the northern part of Egypt. So I just want to clarify, when we talk about Upper and Lower Egypt, that's not north and south, that's the other way around, because of the way the river runs. Now, Egypt also was more rich than Mesopotamia in terms of mineral wealth. Um, Stone minerals that also had clay, um, well, stone for building, and also precious stones. Now, what Egypt lacked was hardwood, wood for building more, I guess you'd say, like regular structures, because you can have stone for building, your big temples and whatnot, but for just regular houses, and you don't need to build everything out of stone. It would get ridiculous. So they traded what they had in abundance for hardwood. Now, we talked about the cuneiform that was developed in Mesopotamia. Now, in Egypt, their form of writing was hieroglyphics, which, let me make sure. Okay, we might have a few more people in here. In case you weren't here earlier, hush, kitty. In case you weren't here earlier, I more or less took roll. So if you weren't in here, then just say you're here in the comments. And if your name isn't your screen name, like me, just put your name in the comment. That's just how I'm going to take roll from now on. Just put it in the comments. So, hieroglyphics. It essentially means sacred writing. It was developed around 3100 BC. The way it developed was interesting. Do we have... No. It took a bunch of different forms, and even today, even though we have, translated hieroglyphics, it's still a little bit difficult. Because some of them are pictures that mean words, some of them are, words that are just sounds, some of them are pictures that just mean things, that just have ideas. And then the discovered papyrus, which is sort of a paper made from reeds, allowed for the more mundane writings. So rather than just carving everything in stone, they were able to do writing that it's just easier to do. If you had to carve everything in stone, you wouldn't be doing the kind of writing that when you have a journal on paper. Now, as I mentioned, even though today we have a somewhat understanding of hieroglyphics, it's still pretty difficult. But because this was so long ago that the hieroglyphics were used, the meanings were completely lost. The use of hieroglyphics were completely abandoned for thousands of years until Napoleon's soldiers discovered the Rosetta Stone. This happened in the early 1800s, so it's been about 200 years that we've rediscovered how to read hieroglyphics. And, well, we'll talk about where the Rosetta Stone came from. But there's a very big gap in time of when the Rosetta Stone was made and then when it was discovered, and then there's just this big time of we don't know what any of this means. So here again, because I like to see things. Lower Egypt is in. I'm sorry, I nearly goofed there. All of this is Lower Egypt because Egypt itself is quite large and the Nile is huge. Upper Egypt would actually be much further to the south because the Nile River is massive. Actually, my hands are just below the camera there. So when I say the delta region of the Nile, it's where it fans out there because all that green is where the floodplains are and where the people are able to grow and use that land to live on, essentially. Even though everything around them is desert. Egypt's quite fascinating. Memphis was the capital for quite some time. It was also where most of the mummification took place. Just FYI, Cairo wasn't always the capital. It was Memphis for a long time. So here's your typical hieroglyphs. You can tell that it wasn't just like with the cave painting where it was just stuff on the walls. It had meanings. You get the repeated symbols, what appears to be a man sitting, and the bird, and the different kinds of birds actually. This seems to be some kind of water bird. This is some kind of hawk. There's the hawk again, same water bird. Oh, I thought I would have had a picture of the. Oh no, I have a picture of the Rosetta Stone later. Like, why don't I have a picture of the Rosetta Stone? Oh yeah, because that's actually a thing. In a few more chapters. So, these Egyptian dynasties, there's, oh, great. Wow, good thing we're not on the Gulf Coast. Hurricane season. So the dynasties began, as we mentioned, Upper and Lower Egypt united around 3000 BC. Narmer united the two kingdoms, the early dynastic period. There's this whole thing here on page, well, it's on page 21 for me. Again, I don't know what edition your books might be and how it might be different. But I've got like the Palette of Narmer here. Let's see. Come on. It's not live. Hold on. There we go. The Palette of Narmer, which might not be bright enough. Wrong one. Which shows his victory over. Does it say? Yeah. Wearing the headdress of Lower Egypt. Okay, yeah. So Narmer was from Upper Egypt, and he conquered Lower Egypt, and the palette, which is actually used for um, mixing the eye makeup for war, I believe it says here. No, just royal eye paint. Um, but it shows these various just victorious poses and the Egyptian gods, looking over Narmer in his victory. It's quite a thing. So the Old Kingdom, there's a bunch of time periods here. 500 years of stability, and again, the thing about Egypt is just it's so long. There's such long periods of here's stuff that happened. It was hundreds of years, and that's about all we got because there's just so much. This was when the rulers were regarded as gods. So this was the book doesn't like to use the term pharaohs. That was a term coined in the Bible. Yeah, which isn't quite accurate. Now, this was when the construction of the pyramids were ordered. Now, the thing about the pyramids, I mean, they're still around today. They're, ancient. But they were extremely expensive, and the cost of putting these things together may have actually weakened the Old Kingdom. Now, that said, to dispel a couple of myths, they weren't built by slave labor. They were built by farmers who had finished their farming, and the rulers were like, hey, want some extra money? Build this crap for us. And the farmers were like, well, if you guys are the rulers and you're paying us, so why not? I mean, a lot of people still died building it. That's not untrue. But that's still true today. So the Old Kingdom fell in 2124. The Middle Kingdom, the royal power wasn't seen as, almighty as in the Old Kingdom. Royal power was weaker. People could pass through the other world, not just royalty, as long as you could afford it, essentially. This was when the god Osiris became more prevalent. Now, there was a bunch of gods in Egyptian mythology, and I would be hard-pressed to try to name even a portion of them. Of course, Ra being the sun god. I think Horus. Nope, I'm not going to try. I don't remember exactly what Horus was. But Osiris was depicted as being important for mummification because he himself was seen as a divine mummy. He pissed off Set, who was a more malevolent god, and was dismembered and scattered across Egypt, and his sister found his pieces and stitched him back together. And since he, was a god, he wasn't dead, but was instead seen as being this living personification of mummification. Why am I not in streaming mode? Hold on. Streamer mode. On. There. Okay. So, as I mentioned, if you could afford it, you could be mummified. Now, these folks were beset by the Semitic Hyksos, who used horses and chariots to run roughshod over the Egyptian military. However, while they were able to invade Egypt, they never actually ruled it. I guess when you're a highly mobile invasion force, you have a hard time actually settling down and conquering. And by 1570, they were fully driven out. So there, of course, the Great Pyramids in Giza, the Sphinx, which is a whole separate enigma in and of itself. If you read any H.P. Lovecraft, he was fascinated by Egypt and the Sphinx and the idea of mummies and this whole concept of life after death. Or not even life after death, but this idea of continuing to live after you should have been dead. Because Lovecraft did more than just, Cthulhu. There's a lot to his stuff. There's Osiris. He can tell he's a mummy because, he's turning green. So, moving on to the New Kingdom, you had Amenhotep before. He was the whole thing. Now, monotheism, if you're not aware, means that rather than all these gods that I just spent like 15 minutes talking about, there would be only one god that they worshipped. Which caused a lot of problems in Egypt because, there's all these gods. Egypt has more gods than, Marvel has superheroes, if you want to use a modern day popular culture joke. The thing about Egyptian gods, though, it's even more than that, though. There weren't just a lot of them. They would sometimes combine to form a new god. They would sometimes split off and form other gods. Like, I think at one point, one of Ra's eyes got gouged out and formed a new god. Or part of... I don't remember the name of the god. There was a god that's like a lioness god, and they pulled part of her spirit out because she was just murdering people. And she became Bast, who is like this goddess of essentially cats, and she's far more chill, and like that's the whole thing. So what says an error has occurred? Oh crap! The stream. Hold on. Yeah, refresh it or hit live. It's being weird. There we go. Yeah, it got all weird for me. Yeah, the stream's being wonky. It's always something. Okay. Yep, if the video conks out, try and refresh it, or at least go down to the bottom and hit the little live button and see if it'll play back up to where I am. Excuse me. So it took until 1250s to get order restored. Now a lot happened between Amenhotep and Ramses. It mentioned King. I can't pronounce his full name. Tukhenaton, King Tut. So anyway, by 1250s, order was restored. This was the beginning of a series of military rulers under Ramses II. So rather than rulers simply being from a dynastic line, these rulers would be generals first and win their popularity through conquest. Now, as I mentioned, Egyptians were usually polytheistic. I mentioned Ra, the sun god, because I mean, if you're going to be a society that depends on agriculture, obviously having the cool. Thank you. Make sure you're on my roll. Cool. All set. Thank you. Again, man, why does it not stay live for me? Okay. No, you're good. You're fine. I understand. It's early. But yeah, if you're an agricultural society, you want the sun and the rain to be on your side. And in particular, if your rulers were seen as divine, obviously they were the ones controlling the weather, so they were controlling the Nile, which was both good and bad. I'll do that in just a minute. Because if there was a drought or an awful flood that messed everything up, it was the ruler's fault. I mean, I mean, here I wouldn't be able to make this joke if I taught, overseas. But especially here in the South, whenever Jim Cantore, the weatherman, whenever he goes to the beach and people see him, they're like, "Oh crap, we got to evacuate. Jim Cantore is here. The hurricane's gonna hit." Because I mean that's his job. Whenever a hurricane's gonna be bad, he goes to where it's gonna be. And I mean, sure he's gonna be a little more accurate than a ruler saying, "No, everything's cool. I'm the ruler." But I mean, it's like being angry at the weatherman for saying it's gonna rain and being wrong, or vice versa. Like, they can't control it. The weather's gonna do what the weather's gonna do. But if you're gonna say, "Oh well, I'm a divine being, so blah 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 blah," it's like, well, you got to take the good with the bad, or the bad with the good, rather. Now, on page 25, again, assuming well, 24 and 25, assuming your book's similar to mine. It also mentions Hatshepsut. I assume I'm pronouncing that right. Who was a female ruler. And I mean, we do talk about Cleopatra later, but she's like Rome later. That's in another 2 or 3 chapters. Excuse me. However, she ran Egypt just as well as any male ruler, and I mean Egyptian queens were just as prominent. And it mentions here that, let's see, I thought I talked about her specifically. I guess not. Huh. I guess, okay. Never mind. I must be thinking of something I had read elsewhere. Anyway, page 25 mentions a little bit. It mentions that that they wanted to keep the dynastic line pure and to keep out the common blood, so queens were more common than royal women in Mesopotamia. So there were some Egyptian queens. Hatshepsut, though, was the most important. Most Egyptian queens ruled alongside a male ruler, but she did her own thing. In fact, her title was, quote, and this is not a typo, King of Upper and Lower Egypt and Daughter of Ra. So she was not the queen, she was the king. She wasn't playing around. Also, official portraits depicted her with a beard. Now, this wasn't a, Viking beard. This was with the little, cap on the end of her chin. So, let's see if I can hold this up to the camera properly. So that was probably for royal portraits and whatnot. Um, a symbol of power and such. Cleopatra was different for different reasons. Page 25, the outside views shows Egypt not from records of the Egyptians, but from the nearby kingdoms that would trade with Egypt, and how they saw Egypt as this, this powerful monolithic structure. And even, and this is quite amusing. Let's see. Oh no, this is a different one. Doggone it! I keep getting ahead of myself. Right, that's in. Yeah, I'm thinking of Alexander the Great. Yeah, the city of Tyre. Prostrating himself, calling himself the dirt under the feet of the sun god king, etc., etc. So yeah. Okay, this one you guys probably won't get, but I had to. Alright, there's Ra. And Hatshepsut. Without the beard. Alright. So let's move a little further out of Egypt before we finish up for the day, because I got a little bogged down at the beginning. So, Iron Age. So, the thing about the ages, as I said before, they're more about the tools and weapons that the people use. It doesn't really have anything to do with time periods. Just making sure. Yep. Hey, Toru. Why aren't you up here seeing me? So, just a couple of quick civilizations to touch on. We have the Minoans. Again, this isn't live. Relatively unknown, from the island of Crete. Sorry. They were a major center for Mediterranean trade at this time. There's a depiction. There are large depictions of bulls in their art. I actually got a picture of it to show you guys. It's this whole thing. I don't know. It's weird. Also, they used a type of writing known as the linear AB. It's an old, very extinct type of writing that sort of was a route for later writing. And they disappeared in about a 50-year time period. No one's entirely sure what happened. We think it might have been a volcanic eruption in the Mediterranean, but we don't have total evidence on what happened. It's one of the weird mysteries of history. Excuse me. Now the Mycenaean Greeks, this is going to be important because obviously the next like 2 chapters are about the Greeks. So they had heavily fortified settlements. They were constantly fighting. Now they were influenced by Minoan writing, so they took this linear AB and used it. Now they eventually invaded and took over Crete, but by the time they got there, the Minoans were already gone. Okay, so this is the bull art found in the Minoan ruins. Rather than it being like bull fighting, you know, where they're stabbing the bull as it runs by, it's this leaping over the bull. It's like this idea of rather than, you know, fighting it head on, you're simply jumping out of the way, this acrobatics. I believe Minoa is also where the tail of the Minotaur comes from. Now we don't have much on the ancient Mycenae structures because many of these old cities were simply built on top of by the newer Greek city-states once the Greeks returned after the Greek Dark Ages, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. But in a few places they did just completely abandon the city and not come back, so we were able to find enough of the ruins to figure out what these cities would look like, which wasn't much. I mean, they were just small, walled, little. I mean, as you can see, residences. So more than Mycenaeans. Again, they survived through trade and war, not really agriculture. So they didn't grow their own stuff. They just took what they needed through war, or they traded for what they needed. So they weren't really much of a civilization, since one of those pairs of things they need for a proper civilization is agriculture. They were involved in the Trojan War, which is memorialized in Homer's Iliad. We'll talk more about Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey next chapter. This was around 1200 BC. Again, we'll talk about that at the beginning of the next chapter. But I just want to mention the Mycenaeans because they're in this weird period of history where not a lot was actually written down. And the Trojan War and the Iliad, well, the Trojan War happened in a period of time when almost no records survive. And the Iliad is our best record of it, but it was written after the fact. So it's not technically a record of it happening, it's just a retelling of it happening. So it's really not a reliable source, but it's the best we've got. So the Hittites, I mentioned these folks when I was talking about the Bronze Age and Iron Age thing before. They invaded Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, around 2000 BC. They were the ones that were manufacturing iron, and it took about 1,000 years for the other groups to begin using iron themselves. Also, there were the Sea Peoples, who we know very little about. They were not Hittites. I just have them under here because I didn't want to give them their own separate section for just one thing. But they literally, we know almost nothing about them except they showed up and they wrecked everybody. They were probably just cast off from all these groups, and they just raided everybody and burned everything and caused so much turmoil that all these empires fell apart. The Phoenicians, we'll actually mention them again later, so keep them in mind. They were known as the Purple People because they traded a purple dye made from sea snails. They were this massive trading empire and used a Semitic alphabet. The Phoenicians are extremely important because because the alphabet they used, rather than having letters or symbols that meant like ideas or entire words, they had letters that responded to entire sounds. Now, the only issue was they only had consonants, which is weird to think about, but it was a step forward. The Greeks will work on that later, but it was an extremely big step forward in modern linguistics, and that's why we have what's known as phonetics or phonics today. It's based on the Phoenicians. This idea of sounding something out, use your phonics, if you will. Literally the Phoenicians. That's where we got it from. So you got your Trojan horse. If you don't know that story, a bunch of Greeks up in the horse, and it's like, oh, we'll give this to the Trojans because we lost, and the Trojans brought it in, and there was a bunch of Greeks up inside it, and then they jumped out and opened the gates, and the Greeks ran in and murdered a bunch of people. So there's the Hittites up in Anatolia, again, modern-day Turkey. And then you've got down here Canaan, and then Egypt here. But yeah, you had Ramses II was all the way up here in Syria. Modern day, I guess this would be Israel. And then know, the Hittites had all of this. There's Troy there. This so over here is use your words, Greece. Now the thing about Phoenicia is, while they only controlled a little bit of land, they controlled a lot of sea or trade routes. So they basically had the entire Mediterranean in terms of trade routes. But what was more important was this little city they had here, Carthage. Because what they didn't realize is there was a big, powerful empire out here that would eventually move in and wipe these guys out. They still had Carthage. We'll get to that later as well. And there's the shell of these purple sea snails that they made the dye out of. Get to that in a minute. Okay, so last question before I let you guys go. Okay, so purple dye is all well and good. Why would making purple dye be something worth naming a group of people after? Like, why would that make these people so rich they could make an entire trading empire off the back of it? Why would purple dye be that important? Damn thing will not. There. What do you know about the color purple? Especially in regards to history. Exactly. Exactly. Purple is the color of royalty, and therefore it's going to be expensive. And also, these particular sea snails weren't especially common. So, you know, if you corner the market on these buggers, and the buyers you're selling them to can pay you lots of money, you'll be making lots of cash. Yeah, cool. So, that'll be it for us today. Next time, we'll just, rather than spend like the entire first part of the class calling names and waiting for you guys to respond, I'll just have you guys sound off in chat once you get in. Yeah, that'll do it for us. Unless you guys have any more questions, we'll call it a day, and I'll see you guys on Thursday. And we'll finish up this chapter and move on to Greece. To, what's it called? Mini Greases. I hate that. I mean, I appreciate what they mean, but I hate that. Alright, well, email me if you need anything, and I'll catch you guys later on. I'll go ahead and close this down and get ready for my next class. Yeah, we literally have one more slide to go, but there's a lot to it, so I don't want to cram it in the last couple of minutes. Alright. See you guys later on. Where's my... There we go. Bye.